Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am your host. Happy to be joined by my guys, Alex and Tyler, as always. Alex, we'll start with you, man. How are you doing tonight?
Doing good.
Sounds good. I hope you're not as bored by the NBA Eastern Conference and Western Conference Finals as I am.
Can't tell you. Haven't watched any of them.
I feel that. Tyler's here as well, man. Tyler, how you doing?
Doing very well. I rarely watch NBA basketball, and now that the Sixers aren't even in it, so I can't even root for somebody else's team, I definitely am not watching it anymore.
Yeah, man, these playoffs are just brutal. I don't know if you guys follow StatMuse, but anybody out there should definitely follow them. They posted a graphic of like the amount of clutch minutes per game that there have been, minutes where the margin is 10 points or less. And it was in the fourth quarter, that is. And it was like 10 minutes in the first round, 5 minutes in the second round. And then this round, it was like 1.25 or some shit. It's just like every game has been a blowout.
Sweet.
You're not. In terms of definitely missing much, want to give a shout out, of course, to Tyler and his fiance Janae for graduating. Big milestone in the Shun family this week. So Tyler, Janae, congrats, man.
Yeah, thank you very much. We both graduated. It took a long time. Took me a long time at least. And I haven't even taken a real class since spring of 2020 when the pandemic happened. And then I just did research for 2 years after that. So it felt like forever because I needed to graduate. But I did it as a formality, and hey, it was fun.
Was definitely fun for sure. A little bit of a housekeeping before we get started today. There is an Isaiah Spiller jersey giveaway pending on our Twitter page. You have to be a supporter on Patreon or through YouTube membership on here. Tyler posted the link to join there earlier. So in case you missed it, you want to join, you can support the show through Patreon or YouTube. Do not have to do both to be eligible for the giveaway, and whatever platform you choose, we will greatly appreciate it. And the instructions for that giveaway are posted on either platform. So if you want a chance at a Isaiah Spiller jersey, you can join up. And of course, we do appreciate all the great support there. So make sure and tune in there. All right, so today we have a good show planned for you guys. We're going to talk about some of building, and we're going to have a good conversation there. I haven't really talked a lot about Justin Herbert over the last few weeks, which I think is kind of indicative of where this team and the roster have gone over the last few months. So, and then we'll also kind of continue our conversation from last time, where we will sort the Chargers' key defensive players into tiers. I think a much more interesting conversation, potentially some more debate, which will be a lot of fun, and excited to get to that one. But of course, we'll talk about Justin Herbert, have some a good conversation here, specifically because Nick Cothrell, friend of the show, shared that BetOnline actually has Justin Herbert as the betting favorite for the 2022 MVP award. He's mostly 5th or 6th on some of the other betting sites, which is kind of where I would lean. But Tyler, what'd you make of BetOnline having Justin Herbert as the favorite?
That would be great, because that would mean that he took a huge step forward and the Chargers are going to have a fantastic record. I had some fun, and doing my best Arjun impression, I looked at the EPA per play plus CPOE composite stat, and over the last 5 seasons, the MVP has been first, second, first, and first in the EPA per play plus CPOE composite ranking stat, which is great.
They talk all this shit on analytics, and then it goes right in line with it. I love it.
Yeah, so I think that Herbert, so he was 16th ranked in that category in 2020, and then tied for 8th in 2021. So that would be a fantastic jump. To me, though, it just comes down to whoever maybe wins the AFC, but definitely the AFC West. I think that voters are going to reward whoever ends up winning the AFC West, or at least the AFC. I think that's kind of where people are leaning. They know that the AFC is the strongest conference right now. So whoever, again, not a QB wins on a QB stat, but to voters, hey, they won the AFC West, I'll give it to them. Still, Josh Allen being the front runner in most cases does make the most sense to me. If we're talking like Oscar voting when it comes to actors or movies, like canceling each other out, I think Herbert and Mahomes could kind of cancel each other out for some voters.
Sure.
I think Herbert and Burrow could kind of cancel themselves out as well. Whereas Josh Allen is uniquely in his, his own division. And, Mac Jones, Tua, like those guys aren't winning it anytime soon, I don't think. And the Bills are poised to win the most games and probably should win the AFC. So I do think Josh Allen being number one, give or take, on most places makes sense. But Herbert being right there, top 5 for the most part, also makes a lot of sense. I think he has a good shot of doing it. Hopefully voters aren't bored with Herbert because like he's just amazing. He had a rookie of the year campaign, 43 touchdowns that he had last year. So hopefully voters are like, we'll give it to some up and comer or something.
Sure.
But yeah, I think Herbert being right in the mix is fantastic. And if he does win MVP, it means that he was statistically CPOE plus EPA per play, the best quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, no. I was just gonna say, I mean, Herbert kind of is the up and comer, right? Like, I mean, in some sense of the voting, because they've given obviously last year to Rodgers, they've given plenty of MVP awards to Brady. So, I mean, if you're looking to give it to someone else, they've already given, Mahomes and Lamar's MVP to those guys respectively. Herbert sort of is the next guy in addition to Josh Allen and some of these up and coming quarterbacks in general. It's always fun to look at the Russell Wilson MVP odds and be like, oh, I'm going to bet on that. I learned my lesson with that last year, never doing that again. So did learn a lesson or two there. But no, I think Herbert should be top 5, really the top 3. I mean, when you consider it's best quarterback of the year award, and there's not many that you would put above Herbert. Also considering the voter fatigue when it comes to older quarterbacks, there also might be a specific reason this year. There's probably a little Aaron Rodgers fatigue in general. Sure. I think that could, really strike the voter base this year. But I think this is kind of the year where you look at whoever the best up-and-comer quarterback is going to be in general, right? Whether that's Josh Allen, whether that's Justin Herbert. I don't really think Kyler Murray has the ability to hold it for like a whole season, but he probably would have been the MVP last year if you just gave it for the first 8 weeks. I think it's going to go to some quarterback like that. And the stat that he brings up about EPA per play, like Tyler just said, I think you look at that as well in terms of what he's creating for the offense. And MVPs really just come down to who was the best quarterback that year, right? They're never going to give it to another position, so you're just kind of safely betting on that. But yeah, no, I think that Herbert definitely should be one of the favorites to win the award. I almost think he's such a favorite at this point that it doesn't make sense to bet on him, right?
Yeah.
Like last year, I think when we did like MVP discussions regarding Herbert, he might have had like the 8th or like 10th best odds, somewhere around there last year. That probably was where you could have got more value. But I think Herbert should definitely be a top 3 candidate based on how the quarterbacks are kind of laid out right now. As far as winning the AFC, though, I mean that's going to be tough because it's it's a conversation we have in the NBA as well, which is like it's a regular season award based on regular season,
right,
opposed to the postseason. So that's always difficult to do with it. But yeah, I think Justin should definitely be top 3. I probably agree with Tyler though that I favor Josh Allen for the award right now.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to sound boring or anything. I would kind of pick Josh Allen to be that guy too right now, based off of, I think EPA per play and CPOE might not favor Josh Allen as much, so that would be an interesting trend there. But I think when you're talking about MVP, you're talking about one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and also a team that is kind of the first or second seed. And we don't really see, kind of like a 4 seed or a 5 seed or wild card team kind of win the MVP. So the Chargers would absolutely have to help Justin Herbert in that regard and be able to, kind of take a leap as a team. And I think they will, but I don't know if they'll be able to get all the way up to, the 1 seed, the 2 seed. I think they certainly can. I think that's certainly possible. But, a lot of this will tie hand in hand with the team. And I do agree that I kind of feel like whoever is the 1 or 2 seed in the AFC is going to have an MVP candidate quarterback.
Yeah.
You talk about voter fatigue, and like the last 5 years, it's been Brady and Rodgers pretty consistently.
Yeah.
With a Mahomes year and a Lamar Jackson year where they just had a crazy statistical season. So, that really is the outlier. Like, you don't necessarily have to be 1 or 2, But if you aren't, you have to have a crazy statistical season. And so, Christian Castillo, I don't know if Herbert's going to get 6,000 yards passing, 58 touchdowns, and 10 rushing touchdowns. But I certainly think we could see him take a bit of an improvement. Again, having Gerald Everett kind of, give him some more easy opportunities, better protection, giving him, opportunities for more deep shots. So anything is possible here. I think if you're talking about Justin Herbert objectively, you're talking about a top 5 quarterback in the league, potentially making a top 2 or 3 leap this year. And I think that certainly will lend itself towards getting some votes, especially if he's able to win the AFC West and kind of outshine Patrick Mahomes, Russell Wilson, and Derek Carr.
Yeah, so Josh Allen the previous year was second in that stat category and then 10th right behind Justin Herbert. If you want to look at something similar to Josh Allen as like a dual threat sort of guy, because for the most, like I know Rodgers can run it, but it's been Rodgers, then Jackson, but then Mahomes, Brady, Ryan. Cam Newton actually won it in 2015, and he was 8th in this category, so it doesn't have to be first. And then Herbert this past year did have a higher EPA per play plus CPOE than Newton in 2015. That said, that 2015 team also went 15-1.
Yeah.
So
and Cam had
a lot of games.
Cam had like 15 rushing touchdowns or something crazy like that. I'm sure
something ridiculous. Yeah. Alex, what do you think? I forget where I saw this, but apparently either frequency or money wise, Jalen Hurts was the most bet quarterback for MVP. What do you think? Not because people think he's the front runner, but because that's where the good money is. What do you think about that?
Hurts is a weird one because you could kind of talk yourself into like him having like a 2015 Newton season. Like obviously I don't think the Eagles are going to be that good, and that's like the big roadblock towards him getting that good. I also don't think he's nearly as good of a passer as Cam Newton, but with rushing touchdowns and how fantasy works, you could kind of see him adding rushing touchdowns to his total and making it better. Plus he has better receivers now with the addition of AJ Brown. I'm just not a huge believer in Jalen Hurts, so I mean at this point it kind of is what it is. I think I saw him at like plus 1,800, something like that. So he's a little bit like below where like Herbert would have been last year. So, I mean, good value if, he really does take that leap forward. I just don't see that happening from him. I mean, he's in the right division to do it. Like, if you're going to take the MVP leap and you're going to, put up some big stat lines and cupcake games, like, yeah, that's the division to do it. And so there's a route to it, but I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, Hurts will definitely be improved, and having AJ Brown there will obviously help a ton there. But I think you have to be like a legitimately good quarterback, and I don't think Jalen Hurts is legitimately good. I think he's a fine starter, and I get why people would bet on him just because of the betting value. But just getting back to Justin Herbert for a second, I thought kind of expanding the conversation a little bit. Something that we talked about was just kind of the importance of keeping some continuity around him heading into this offseason, and being able to bring back Mike Williams and being able to keep Joe Lombardi around. And obviously they lost Frank Smith to Miami, which I think is kind of less about him and more about the offensive line. But he said to Haley Elwood in an interview in that Camera On series that at this time last year he was kind of drowning in the playbook and everything that the Chargers coaching staff was asking of him to do. And I think we've talked so much about everything the Chargers have added this offseason, and rightfully so. Like they've added a lot of great players, but I think just the importance of Justin being able to stick around in an offense for the first time in consecutive years since high school, and be able to have like legitimately good coaches around him, good talent, and just the mental stress that he won't have to worry about this year because he's not having to learn such an extensive playbook is going to be huge for his development. And again, just being able to focus on getting passing reps with all of these new players and getting passing reps and building relationships with Josh Palmer and Mike Williams and continuing to build on positives from last year is going to be huge, because again, he's not going to have to spend all of his time learning a new playbook and it being one of the most extensive playbooks in the NFL.
Yeah. No, that's going to be huge. I believe Josh Palmer in one of his early pressers just recently said that the final play, that touchdown to him against the Raiders, was a play they didn't even run during the season or whatever it was. Like, they're trying to put so much of this offense together. I think Eckler said after week 4, they were trying to install new plays on the fly. Like, now you know these. You have, as Staley says, the inventory of experiences. That's going to be huge for Herbert. And again, he is not much of a better season he could have had, but still, he was 8th in that stat category. And so there is room for him to grow a little bit more. And if it's just more chances downfield, fewer interceptions, heck, just better chemistry in this offense so people aren't running the wrong routes, so you don't throw, 3-4 interceptions to Austin Eckler. That's huge for this team. I can't wait to see what year 2 looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think just continuity is so crucial for Justin Herbert, crucial for the Chargers in general. And the fact that it's like his first consecutive seasons high school that he's had the same coach, or same offensive system in place is just crazy. What was it, 3 and 5 years, or what? How many years at Oregon? How many offensive coordinators?
He had 3 different coordinators at Oregon, but it was different schemes and things like that. And then, so it's really been since high school that he's had same scheme, same coach, and back-to-back years.
So we're talking about what, 5 offensive coordinators, 5 offensive minds in a period of 6 or 7 years. Like, that's pretty brutal. And so it's going to be, it's amazing that he is as good as he is, despite all of that. That speaks a lot to his natural talent and, just how great of a prospect he kind of was, even at a young age. But it's insane to see how much he's grown. Insane to see him be at the front of the MVP award category. But, I think the continuity definitely speaks to that. And, hopefully he's not drowning in the playbook as much, and they have enough guys to, sort of take some of the load off of him at times. And, I think the continuity also speaks to Brandon Staley's odds, right? In the same tweet, Nick Cottrell also had him as the second favorite to win Coach of the Year. So, another year in that system, I think, is both a big positive for Justin Herbert, obviously, but a positive for coaching staff as well.
And what a great segue to our next topic about Brandon Staley and his second best coach of the year odds. Steven, what's our second topic?
All right, good job, Tyler. Going back to your host roots from the start of the show, I see. So we'll shift gears here and we'll talk about kind of the big second topic that we have today, which is sorting the Chargers defensive players by tiers. Obviously, we did this earlier in the week with the Chargers offensive players. So we'll break things down with the Chargers defensive players. We'll make that ticker go away as well. So let's get this graphic up here and we'll get started.
Hold up.
Nice.
Shut up, Alex.
Wait, go back to the other angle. So we're on the side.
Okay.
Do we like that better or us at the bottom?
Chat, vote. Do you want us bigger or more hidden? Do you want my face bigger on your screen or smaller?
I think this is probably the look. I don't know.
I think this looks better personally.
Sure. Let's do it.
Hey, James, we only talk about relevant news to other teams, so we will not be talking about that.
Wah, wah.
I guess I can put the banner back on here too.
Oh.
All right. So where do you want to start, guys?
Okay, well, I know where to start. Hold on.
Can we read the tiers first?
Huh?
Is it the same tiers or different tiers? Oh, you added a different one from last time?
Oops. Yeah, I added an extra tier. Okay, all right, got that one out of the way. So I'll go on the list of tiers. Yes, I know E comes before F. Leave me alone. S is all pro. I consider those usually top 3 or have been an all pro at some point, or top 5 every year. Then we have A, top 10. B, I have above average starter instead of solid starter. I don't know if that makes any difference to anyone. So B is above average starter or number 2 option. C plus an average starter with upside. C is an average starter or number 3 option. D is an emergency starter or backup. And F is the roster bubble or practice squad, or as it is more known now, the Joshua Kelly category. And then E is for Emeka Egbule.
For those who don't know, go back and watch our show from a few months ago, and you'll understand why Emeka Egbule has his own spot. All right, so obviously, I think the natural place here is to start with Derwin James. He technically has been an All-Pro before. It was as a rookie. He was not an All-Pro this past year, but he was a Pro Bowl player, which I think is kind of ridiculous. But it is what it is. So, Alex, why don't you kick us off? Where would you put Derwin James?
I put Derwin James in the All-Pro tier. I mean, you can make the argument from his rookie season, he was already that. And I think whether or not you have him as like an actual All-Pro, it's kind of the same thing we talked about with Justin Herbert last episode. He hasn't technically been an All-Pro because Brady and Rodgers are going to be here for 40 more years. But at the same time, the amount that he does on defense, everything that he's done to come back from the injury that he did and still play at the level he did, Derwin James is the, undisputed leader of the defense. And I think that you have to put him in the All-Pro category. Obviously, we'll have to see over the next few years just how his health holds up. But right now, he's absolutely playing still at that All-Pro level. And I don't. You could kind of make a debate, I think, between top 10 and All-Pro with the amount of quality safety talent around the league. But I don't think there are more than 3 guys that could be ranked above Derwin James. So for me, I'd put him in that All-Pro tier.
Yeah, if I'm talking about Derwin, or I'm just talking about safeties, and you want me to make this tier with NFL safeties, Derwin James would be, probably the first name that I'd say because I'm a Chargers fan. But if I weren't a Chargers fan, he'd be the third name that I would say at worst.
Right.
I do think he belongs here. I think his play warrants that. And projecting to this next year, when he hopefully stays healthy in the similar scheme with the number of weapons around him, this is probably going to be his best year yet, potentially. And so I do think he belongs in here. He's the guy I'm most comfortable saying is top 3, top 5 at his position on this defense.
So for reference's sake, I have the All-Pro teams up here from last year. First team All-Pro safeties from 2021 were Kevin Byard from Tennessee and Jordan Poyer from Buffalo. And then second team All-Pro safeties, there were 3 of them because there was actually a tie. Justin Simmons was one. Micah Hyde was another one, the other Buffalo safety. And then Budda Baker was the third safety through a tie, which I just feel like is kind of ridiculous. I hate ties. I wish there's no part in them for sport, or there's no part in sports for them. So I think you could, for me, Justin Simmons is one of the more underrated players in the league. I think he's in the conversation for best safety in the league. Unfortunately, I think the safeties from Buffalo were kind of voted as the All-Pro guys because they were, kind of the catalyst for the number 1 defense last year. So that was more specifically about the team. I wouldn't necessarily say that those 2 players are All-Pro type players if you were kind of talking about just talent and statistical impact and things like that. So I think for me, if you're talking about best safeties, you're talking about Simmons, obviously talking about Derwin, and kind of the Budda Baker tier, I think is probably where I would kind of end that conversation. So for me, Derwin is obviously an All-Pro caliber player. For my money, he's the best safety in the league, and I think his impact statistically is just really so rare for what we see from other players, because Simmons is kind of your ball hawk player. He's one of the more consistent turnover machines in the league over the last few years, but he doesn't necessarily offer you a ton from man-to-man coverage or run support. Same thing can be said about Kevin Byard. I mean, you're talking about Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, who more kind of your just Swiss Army knife kind of players. So I think for me, Derwin kind of offers you the best of everything, where he's going to get his hands on, a few turnovers. He's going to be able to cover tight ends, cover the slot, play the run in the box, and all that good stuff. So I think if you're just looking for the guy who does everything well, I think you're talking about Derwin James more so than anybody else in the league.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it perfectly there. I think CeeDee Lamb, outside of that one, garbage catch at the end of the half, had 20 yards because Derwin played the slot. Derwin's got 2 forced fumbles blitzing off the edge, deep safety, strong safety. I mean, just an all-around player, fantastic everywhere. I'd argue he was their second best edge rusher last year as well.
I don't know if I would go that far, but he would definitely have a conversation, and I can't wait to see more of Derwin in the pass rush aspect of things this year. Of course, have to give a quick shout out to Tyler's mom, always in the super chat, throwing down some super chats, which we really appreciate. So I think we should talk about Khalil Mack next, because if you ask Brandon Staley, I think you're kind of talking about Khalil Mack as kind of a better player. I forget which PFF writer did it recently, but they tiered all of their own players as well, and they actually had Khalil Mack ranked higher than Joey Bosa. I think Mack was third and Bosa was sixth. So what do you guys make of Mack and his selection?
So I personally, depends on where you have Joey Bosa, I guess. I would have Joey Bosa higher, and statistically it does pan out that way.
Yeah.
I understand that Mack is, has been hurt and there's some issues and playing Chicago or whatever, but you're 19th pass rush productivity, 18th in win rate, 110th in run stop rate. The previous year, you're 5th in win rate, 28th in productivity, 72nd in run stop rate. I'm not saying he's a bad player, like by any means. And I think this is going to be a huge year for him. And I guess you could argue in this year with the projection that he is going to be that S tier all pro. But for right now, and I kind of feel some of the same way about JC Jackson, I do need to see it in powder blue and gold. I do want to see him do this first with the Chargers before I say, okay, that's the all pro. We remember that. I remember watching, when we faced the Raiders. So I think that it's definitely in there, and I think he could have that season. So if you put him in all pro, I'd get it. But to me, if anyone of the two edge rushers is going into the all pro tier, I do think it is Joey Bosa, because A, I've seen it, and B, the numbers back it up much better than it does Mack. And so if Bosa is going into all pro, I think Mack should belong in like that A tier top 10.
So, okay. I'm not going to say that I think Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack are equally as good, because I do think Joey Bosa is better. But I kind of think they're both in the top 10 tier. Joey obviously more towards the front of that. Khalil Mack right now towards probably, sort of like what we talked about with Keenan Allen and the wide receivers. Like there's probably just so many edge rushers around the league now, and considering he's been injured, Khalil Mack has probably fallen to like the back half of that top 10 for sure, or maybe just slightly outside. But I still think he gives you the impact of somebody that is a top 10 player. And if he does come back from injuries, he's playing next to Joey Bosa. Like that's going to be a recipe for success, and probably his best season that he's had in a number of years, as long as he can stay healthy. So I still think you have to worry about the threat of him, even if he might be on his realistic decline. To me, you still have to respect him and what he can do as a top 10 edge rusher. And I don't know, like it feels weird to put him in like the solid starter option too, because he's one of the most explosive edge players in the league. So still, even at his age. So, he's also like, yes, he's the number 2 option to Joey Bosa, but he's also not a normal edge number 2 option, right? So for me, I put both of them in the top 10. I think you could make an argument for Joey and all pro, but we'll talk about Joey in a second, I guess.
Yeah. So like you guys, I think I would have Joey ahead of Khalil at this point. I think he's been more productive and stuff like that. But the all pro status for edge rushers is you're talking about 4 players, and you're maybe talking about 5 for somebody who can kind of be that like next guy. But last year the all pro edge rushers were TJ Watt, who was defensive player of the year, Myles Garrett, who was second in that category, and then second team was Robert Quinn, who had like 18 sacks, and then Max Crosby was this final edge rusher who led the league in pressures, was very productive in his own right. So you're asking these edge rushers to be like statistical monsters and not just like reputation. And unfortunately at this point, I think Joey's reputation kind of outshines his production, if you will, because he's just so technically refined. And for whatever reason, Joey does not get the same kind of cleanup sacks or gimme sacks that some of his peers do. Like you watch TJ Watt in the last week against Cleveland, or second to last week against Cleveland, and Baker Mayfield, or not that, I guess that would be second week of the season, not second last week. But anyways, you watch him against the Browns the first time they played, and Baker Mayfield literally runs like right into him. or Max Crosby like gets a free rush and like really should be Yannick Ngakwe's sack, but it really is Crosby's sack statistically. So like for whatever reason, Joey just doesn't get that. He doesn't get easy sacks. He like has to work extra hard. So hopefully, that kind of changes this year with Khalil Mack opposite of him. But I guess that's my long-winded way of saying that I wouldn't put either of the Chargers edge rushers in the all-pro category because it's just so hard for edge rushers to get up in that category. And so I think both of those players could challenge for Pro Bowls because that category you have like 10 players because of the way that the Pro Bowl is set up. If they do Pro Bowls this year, that is.
Right.
So I would put Mac and Bosa in the top 10.
Yeah, I completely would see that. I had them both there. I went back and forth with Joey Bosa in the All-Pro tier, obviously easily in the top 10, because last year, the previous year, it's hard to say last year now, 2020, he was first in productivity, first in win rate, second in run stop rate, like just amazing. But like you said, it's almost like the reputation. Again, he deserves it, but the reputation's almost better than the production because he's just never. It's not a knock on him, but like I called him this past season a breakout candidate because I wanted to see Joey Bosa get like that 15, 16 sack sort of season, and again, he finished 6th, 7th in pressures. So nothing wrong there. And you don't really measure an edge rusher by sack production, but I just wanted to see that elite production. And he's got elite win rates and productivity on like a per play basis, but I just want to see a full 17 games, lead the league in sack sort of performance. So I get it.
Yeah, no, I agree with putting Bosa top 10, and then we can put Khalil Mack in the same tier. This is kind of one of those things where, I would put Joey above Khalil, but at the same time, it doesn't really make sense for me to put one of them in the All-Pro tier and one of them below. I think the difference between them isn't that massive. It's mostly dependent on Max health at this point. But I mean, the advanced analytics and the analytics in general have always been in favor of Joey Bosa, right? Even though he hasn't had that monster 15, 20 sack season. He's always been, I think it's always been for the last couple of years, Aaron Donald having first in pass rusher weight, and then he's either like 2 or 3 with TJ Watt and some of those other guys. So for me, there's no way I think you leave either of them below the top 10 tier. They're both in there.
Absolutely. Definitely both are
100%.
top 10. So we'll do JC Jackson next.
Okay. JC Jackson up there.
So for reference's sake, instead of kind of, middle of the conversation, I'll mention the all-pro cornerbacks from last year to start.
Okay.
First team corners from last year were Trayvon Diggs and Jalen Ramsey. Again, only 2 here. I wish they would include another spot. So they only have 4 defensive back spots, which I feel like in today's NFL, you really should be able to include another one because they have 3 linebacker spots, which I think is just kind of not indicative of where today's NFL is. Anyways, that's a different conversation. Second team all-pro cornerbacks this year were JC Jackson and AJ Terrell. So I believe JC has at least flirted with the all-pro conversation the last couple of years. He wasn't all-pro last year. So I feel like I am a little hesitant to put him in the all-pro category.
Yeah.
For, again, kind of similar reasons that I talked about heading into the offseason was just like, how much of that was the New England scheme? How much of it was, playing for Bill Belichick specifically? Yeah. But I think I would lean towards him being all pro, but I wouldn't necessarily feel as confident in it as I do putting Derwin James there.
Yeah, this one's tough. Because sort of like Rashawn Slater, like he also got second team all pro, and it's like, okay, you know what he can do. The numbers look pretty good, second in passer rating when targeted, second in reception percentage, 7th in forced incompletion rate among the 29 starting corners at that 80% threshold. So the numbers would work, and he has been a second team all pro, and he is paid like one of the better corners, although not top 3, I guess, top 9 or 10 or whatever it is now. So yeah, like you, I could see it going either way. I guess it's like based on where he was last year or the previous years, I could put him in the S tier. But again, sort of like Mac, I don't know. Like I kind of want to see him with the Chargers out of New England before I know for sure. But that's kind of a guessing game. Like, why would I think he'd be a worse player. I do think the talent around him is better. So again, Patriots scheme and all that sort of stuff. I could put him in all pro, but I will do that if Alex goes all pro. If not, then I'll put him in top 10.
Well, yeah, this is a 2 out of 3 vote, I guess. I feel comfortable putting him in top 10. I think there are cornerbacks that I would take over JC Jackson. I mean, you kind of have like your Jalen Ramsey tier, and sort of like those guys to me on the other guys. And I think JC comes after that. Obviously, you have like the numbers to show for it if you wanted to make your case. I just don't put him in the same kind of like coverage tiers as those guys. But you know, I mean, obviously he's going to get his interceptions. He's missed their interception. You know, he's got that big contract now. So for me, he falls into the top 10. Like I guess I just don't think that he's on the same level of cornerback than that Derwin is at safety, for example. Although you can make the case for it, similar to the edge rushers, I think it's a little bit more debatable. So I don't think it's one of the like truths that we've talked about with like Justin Herbert and Derwin James, where it's just like that's where they belong. I think there's a little bit more ambiguity to it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I feel like I would lean towards putting him in the All-Pro category. Yeah. But, you know, you look at like Jair Alexander is back. You know, you're looking at potential Patrick Surtain leap forward, which, you know, if you look at like rookie cornerback numbers and then you look at Patrick Surtain's numbers, like you're having a completely different conversation. Like it's typically so hard in the NFL to make an impact as a corner, as a rookie. And Surtain did that. So I think you're talking about a larger pool of players. But of course, you're talking about JC Jackson, who's led the NFL in interceptions over the last few years. He's been super consistent. So
I think I'm leaning towards all pro, to be completely honest. So, which went exactly against what I just said I would do whenever Alex voted. But like,
just drag him to wherever you want to drag him, and I'm not gonna fight you on it. Just put him in whatever box you want. Just as long.
But then
as
it's tough for me to say that Joey's not an all pro too. Then you know, but like the only thing with JC for me is just I just haven't seen it with the Chargers, and so. But like, is that fair to him or even Mac? Like at least Mac, I can like the numbers show that not quite a top 3 guy in the age and the injuries and all that. JC's played like it. So I actually think that some people in the chat are making pretty good points. And I mean, again, I'm in between either. This makes sense to me. You put him here, totally get it. Put him here, totally get it.
Let's put him in the all pro category.
And he did just make second team. Like
right. And you know, the production has been there. And I think I see what you're saying, but like the reputation of ball production does match for, you know, JC Jackson. We're not talking about, you know, someone like Trayvon Diggs, for example. I know he was first team all pro, which I think is kind of lame, but you know, he led the league in interceptions, but he was also getting cooked, you know, from time to time. Whereas JC was never really doing that. You know, his statistical numbers and coverage are fantastic. And, you know, Arjun showed that graph where he's elite in man coverage. He's elite in zone coverage.
Good call.
So I think, you know, maybe this is just me because I was listening to the Athletic Football Show today and they were doing, you know, non-quarterback drafts and they were talked about all these corners and they didn't mention JC like a single time, not even like the others receiving votes category. So I think there is some like national doubt about JC.
Right.
But if he plays at the level that we kind of expect him to, and the Chargers also play at the level we expect them to, then there really is no reason that JC won't be an all pro, whether that's first or second team.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Jerry Tillery.
Right, we can't go from spectrum to spectrum like that. Like let's ease into the shitty category. Let's start with like
let's save Jerry Tillery for the end of the show.
Like let's go with like Nas or Sebastian Joseph Day or somebody next. And, you know,
I want to talk about Sebastian. Well, I want you guys to debate Sebastian Joseph Day or talk about it. How did you guys rationalize this coming into the show? Because like there's so many different ranges he could be. Well, not really, but like what if he were in top 10? Why? Like, where did you guys rationalize putting him? Like, where did you guys, because the run stop rate, if you're just looking at his role as a run defender, I mean, he should be like all
Right.
pro,
Right.
but it's the whole package. So how did you guys work through that?
Yeah, so I actually, like I said earlier, I just got to interview Sebastian and Morgan Fox's, off-season position coach. So, stay tuned for that interview. And I do feel like Sebastian Joseph Day is an underrated pass rusher. Of course, I shared this a couple of other episodes ago. His 17 game pace from last season was like 35 pressures, 8 or 9 sacks or something like that. So he can produce as a pass rusher. I just don't know really if that pace would like actually hold up because he is such, more of a run defender. So you make a really good point. This kind of depends on how you want to split up the defensive tackle room because, Chris Jones is an elite pass rushing defensive tackle, but he's a lousy run defender and often doesn't play first downs. Whereas somebody like Sebastian Joseph Day is an elite run defender, maybe not necessarily a high-end pass rusher. So I think for me, I would keep him in the range where you're at right now as an above average starter, and be able to be kind of the combination of both, but not necessarily an elite pass rusher, which I do place more value on to put in like the top 10. So I'm comfortable leaving Sebastian Joseph Day in the B range right where you have him.
Yeah, I'm fine with leaving him in the B range too. And I think it's kind of hard, like Steven said, to find guys who are like both complete great pass rushers and great run defenders, like at the defensive tackle position nowadays.
Right.
I mean, for a long time we talked about like, okay, Aaron Donald has obviously been the best defensive tackle in the league, but then after that, for years, I feel like it was okay. Then there's Chris Jones, then there's Fletcher Cox, but like Fletcher Cox is a pass rusher. Chris Jones, as Steven said, is kind of a lousy run defender. So it's like what they, you sort of highlight what they're good at, and then maybe, they're sort of okay at what they're not, but it's not quite their strength like it is with those guys. So I think Sebastian Joseph Day sort of falls in that category, right? Not quite like the complete pass rusher you would want. If he does develop in that, right, you can sort of see him going further, right? And like Tyler said, he's already such an elite run defender that like it's not even funny at this point. So you could kind of see him like being on the edge of that top 10, but I think when you're judging the whole package, he probably would not be around there.
Yeah. Okay. I'm cool with B for Sebastian Joseph Day. Kind of feels like B plus, top 10 based on what you're debating, but overall, this is that makes sense to me. No knock on him. He's going to be a great defender. It's hard to place him in a top 10. Yeah,
and I think if you're, the NFL has shown us that you've got to be at least a high-end pass rusher to be kind of in that top 10 conversation. Last year's all-pro players were obviously Aaron Donald and Cam Hayward were first team, and then second team was Chris Jones and Jeffrey Simmons, who I think you're talking about those elite pass rushers in that conversation. So, if he kind of flirts with the top 10, I think that's certainly possible, similar to how like an Eric Armstead can have like a really good season. And maybe you're talking about like a top 12, 13 kind of defensive tackle. But I think at his best, he's probably an above average starter. So should we do his running mate, Austin Johnson, next?
Sure.
So go ahead, Tyler.
No, I just people in the chat are wondering why I keep putting that like, oh, he's not average. I'm just throwing them on the board, and then we can discuss it. Just people in the chat who are freaking out, I'm just throwing him on the board for now. He might be here, but
Alex, where are you at with Austin Johnson?
I probably keep him in the C tier. I think you could make an argument that like, ooh, if we're just talking about him like exclusively as like run defender, maybe you move him up, but as a pass rusher, like not much skill there. Plus, he's already been in the league for a certain amount of time, so you also can't really like put him in the with upside category. But I mean, still a great upgrade over what they have. It's gonna feel a little bit mean to put him in the C tier. I don't think it should be. I just think there's like a difference between the kind of player that like Sebastian Joseph Day is and where Austin Johnson is at this point. Salaries aren't that different as the Chargers made clear in free agency, and we were surprised that just how much Austin Johnson got on the show. But I do think the actual production value, I put Sebastian Joseph Day a nudge above him. So, by definition, I think Austin Johnson just kind of winds up in the C tier.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I would have Austin Johnson below Sebastian Joseph Day as well. I think part of why Sebastian didn't get a higher contract is, of course, the injury and, coming off of the torn pec. And, Austin Johnson had a career season. So I think some of that is definitely part and relevant to the contract. So I think Austin Johnson, after studying him, I think he's a really, really solid run defender. I think his pass rush is essentially kind of, I don't want to say non-existent, but it's not necessarily something I'm banking on. I think it'll be an improvement over Linval Joseph was last year and the year before that. But, I think Austin's role is much more clearly defined. And whereas I would expect Sebastian to be kind of the consistent, leader in snaps probably of this defensive tackle room, where I feel like Austin is probably coming off of the field for pass rushing situations. He's almost exclusively going to be a run defender. And there's obviously value in that, especially in the Chargers scheme. So I think you have him right here in the average starter category, kind of in a similar tier to an Ode Abuji type of player, where he's just like a stabilizing force, really solid player. Not necessarily going to be like an elite upside kind of guy, but brings a lot of value to a unit that needs to just be solid. So I think leaving Austin Johnson in the average starter category is perfectly fine.
Yep, no complaints here. Totally get it. Below Sebastian Joseph Day, totally understand.
All right, we had a question about where the Chargers' interior pass rush is coming from. So where it's going to come from is from Morgan Fox. Again, good friend of Sebastian Joseph Day. So, I think his interior pass rush is pretty underrated around the league. Brandon Staley in his OTA press conference called him a starter in known pass situations, which I thought was pretty interesting, that he kind of viewed him in that regard. Again, referencing, my interview with his position coach, Ed, they feel like Morgan Fox got kind of screwed out of an additional sack from their game at Tampa Bay in 2020 because Tom Brady got a sack fumble called as an incomplete pass. And so
no kidding.
So if that had gone the other way, you're talking about, 34 total pressures and 8 sacks for Morgan Fox in 2020. Again, you could make that argument about every player, right? But I thought it was funny how Ed specifically brought that up. But I would put Morgan Fox, because I just mentioned the value of pass rushing. I would put him in plus starter with upside, because I think in his best case scenario, playing alongside Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, you're talking about a player that's going to have a ton of one-on-one situations. And last year, the Chargers had those situations. They just didn't have a player capable of taking advantage of those situations. Now you're talking about Morgan Fox, a player with proven production in this kind of scheme. So I think at his best, you're talking about a player with 40 total pressures, 8 or 9 sacks, maybe challenge for 10, and potentially earn a nice little contract somewhere else or with the Chargers. I don't know. But I think, again, that pass rushing upside for me would kind of put him in that C+ category.
That'd be great. I do right in between, because of that pass rush. I'm right there with you. C+, average starter with upside. We don't really know he's going to be the starter as is. Technically, he could just be the D category this year. But I do think if things play out, that he in that C+ category works out really well.
Yeah, I think the upside makes sense in this, because he does have that pass rush ability, and you're talking about what he is relative to the other interior pass rushers they had. So he's absolutely an upgrade over them. And I think relative to the Chargers, we already talked about he's going to be playing next to Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. I think that elevates him as well. So I, because of his pass rush ability, sort of have him over Austin Johnson in that regard. And I think it makes sense, because he's a new addition to the team and because of how improved his pass rushing is going to be over really any Chargers interior pass rusher the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, he's definitely going to be better than what we've had around here.
All right, so off to a good start. We'll speed up the pace a little bit here. I think 2 players that are kind of tough for me to place at this point are Nasir Adderley and Asante Samuel Jr. Based off of, Adderley has basically 0 ball production, but I think his tape is really, really solid. So it's okay, if he can finally figure out how to come down with some of these interceptions, then you're talking about, kind of a Sebastian Joseph Day level kind of player.
Mm-hmm.
But again, his one interception was a complete gift from Drew Brees. So I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts here on Nasir Adderley.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so just looking at the numbers, he did improve 21st out of 62 in run stop rate, tied for 12th in forced incompletion rate. But then there's like 37th in missed tackle rate, 61st out of 65 in passer rating when targeted. And like you said, the production, the fact that I can name the game, the week, the quarterback, the team where he got his interception, and the fact that it was a gimme is not great. Now you can see him flying all over the field and almost making plays against Washington football team, against the Raiders in week 18. They're almost there, but they're not made yet. So to me, I could see him, like, I don't know how I can group him with other safeties. I just, in this certain range, I don't know where he would fit unless I'm looking at stats. I think he can be that above average starter easily, a number 2 option. But until he kind of puts it all together, I do feel like he's that C+ with me, where I think he's a good starter, an average starter. There's a lot of upside there, but he hasn't quite reached it yet. So I don't think I can put him in Sebastian Joseph Day's tier just yet, because I know at least Sebastian Joseph Day 2 years in a row is number 1 in run stop rate, and he's very, very good at that. Adderley doesn't quite have that yet, nor does he have the experience or the timeline, I guess, of being that high level of a safety just yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the upside, debate is sort of interesting because, I mean, this is, I guess, really when you think about it, because he did miss his rookie year, this is going to be his 3rd year sort of in the league. If we're talking about sort of last year of his rookie deal, but 3rd year's, played. I do think a lot of this does come down to ball production as to why he's not higher, because, like as Steven said, you look at the tape and it's like, okay, he beat him here, but just couldn't come down with the ball, right? And the fact that, like Tyler said, that we know exactly when Nasir Adderley's interception happened is sort of a telltale sign of, his struggles with catching the ball. But, overall, a good safety. The other thing I think to debate with the upside category is they did just take JT Woods in the 3rd round, which, I mean, if you're talking about specifically how the Chargers are going to see Adderley and his breakout potential, I think is pretty significant. But obviously, he's a good safety. I think the C+ tier is fair with upside. I just don't know if that upside is going to be realized by the Chargers based on, the direction that they've gone in recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is relevant, and it's going to be really fun to watch, but also curious to see how the ball production does come about, because if they want to put Nasir a little bit more in the box, JT Woods kind of deep, maybe Woods comes down with the interceptions and you're not really seeing much, if any, ball production from Nas again. I think Jay Blue and make sure I get the name right, Dual 12, kind of making some good points about Nas just being in the right position and not necessarily making those plays. I think if you even watch like the Cleveland Browns game, which was statistically like his worst game, and he had like 4 or 5 missed tackles, he was always right there. And, it was just a smidge late on David Njoku, or just a smidge late on Rashard Higgins to make these plays. So I think the upside is there. And I would not put Nasir Adderley in the Jerry Tillery, Kenneth Murray category at this point, because Nas is at least a solid player. No, this is specifically about a comment from NFL here about Nas and Tillery turning it around.
Yeah.
And again, don't mean to single NFL's lit out or by any means, but Nasir Adderley is a solid NFL player. Like, I feel comfortable with him as a starting caliber player, whereas I want Jerry Tillery on the bench as much as possible at this point. So I think they're in 2 very different categories in this world.
Yeah, I get you. Okay, Asante Samuel Jr., where'd you guys end up working with this guy?
Alex, why don't you take that one first?
I mean, I feel like you have to put him in the average starter with upside category. Is that what we're? Oh God! Oh, there's cats outside. I don't know what's going on over there.
Oh my God!
We got birds and cats.
I don't know what's happening over there. Okay. I put him in the average starter with upside category. Can he, sort of become like the CB? I mean, I sort of think he is the CB2 at this point, as opposed to JC Jackson, who's the CB1. But we sort of just have to see it from him. Like, we know he can take that leap, like Tyler sort of indicated before. But I do think that this is the right category for him. Also have to see sort of how they use him, I guess, how much he's going to be playing outside, how much he's going to be playing in the slot. So I would take ASJ in this category as well. Can be certainly very quickly into that Sebastian Joseph Day B category.
Yeah, I had him at C+ as well. I think I just need to see a little bit more from him, see him obviously healthy on the field consistently, what he does in forced and completion rate, being one of the best in the league. Fantastic. There's just some other things he's got to clean up, whether it be kind of some costly penalties, him being the second worst missed tackle rate of all starters last year. Some things will be cleaned up for sure, but you can't deny, like, he's got the upside. If you're talking about upside being, pass production for Morgan Fox, then getting your hands on the football for Asante Samuel Jr., that's definitely his upside. I just think this is like a year 3 thing for him, where we're going into year 3, where he'll be, we can move him up eventually. But for now, going to year 2, I think C+ is perfect.
Yeah, I think it really is a shame that he got injured, because I think he was kind of trending towards being, an above average starter this season. And then I think the concussion kind of just messed with him a little bit. Like, I would be pretty surprised if Asante Samuel Jr. was that low in missed tackle rate again, knowing how I felt about him in college and knowing what, how Brandon Staley has kind of viewed him. And so, again, it's just so hard as a rookie to come into the NFL and be an above average starter right away. And so I think the upside is certainly there. I think you're talking potentially about the breakout player of the year on the defense, and kind of that player who's maybe takes the biggest leap of anyone on the defense. Granted, again, most of the defense is going to be a lot of veteran players. They don't have necessarily a ton of young guys coming into the team or so. Asante is really I think the category for breakout player this year, which we'll of course get into. But I think, again, you're talking about somebody that could have a significant amount of ball production, be a solid coverage player, be solid run defender, and make that jump into above average starter category. So I haven't done any of the linebackers yet. I think obviously I think we're all in agreement that Drew Tranquill is probably the best linebacker on the roster. So let's start with Tranquill, and I think I'm kind of curious to see where Tyler is feeling with this one first.
I don't. He's like average. He's good at some things, not some great at some other things. There are moments where he completely dominates a game, and there were moments early last year where we were trying to get Kenneth Murray off the field, or we wanted Kenneth Murray off the field because Tranquill was dominant. And there's some moments where it's not so great, and then he's injured. I don't see him as an emergency starter.
He's definitely a starter.
Yeah, so I have him as an average starter for now. If you want that upside to be pass rush and maybe some coverage ability, maybe. But I think at this point, he's kind of just settled in as a solid average starter.
Yeah, I think if you're kind of sorting a player with upside, you're talking about somebody that can make that leap up into above average starter. I don't know if Drew has that.
Yeah, I see that. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think he just is what he is at this point. Which is obviously a very effective pass rusher. Sometimes can drop into coverage. Like, obviously the best linebacker on this team, which isn't saying a whole lot, but definitely the guy with the most experience, who's kind of been here the longest. I do sort of wonder what Drew Tranquill's career kind of would have been with the Chargers had he not gotten hurt in 2020 and missed the whole year, right? Like, we could be talking about something completely different, but at this point, I think he's settled into his role. I don't really think there's an upside breakout season coming for Drew Tranquill, but he's definitely the best linebacker they have. So by default, I do think he kind of has to go into the C tier.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we can comfortably put Troy Reeder in the emergency starter backup conversation as well. I don't know if there's a whole lot to debate here with Troy Reeder. I think he, is just that. Like, I would feel pretty bad about my linebacker room if he was the best linebacker on the team. But I think he's a fine backup. And, I, again, a little confused about the process there. I don't want to rehash, old news, but I'm fine with placing him there.
I'm fine with putting him there. The difficult conversation with him is we sort of were like, oh, if he's linebacker 4, if he's linebacker 5, if he's just depth, then that's fine. But I think we've all sort of gotten the feeling, just based on our linebackers have been injured and based on Brandon Staley's comments and the specific desire to go after Troy Reader, that Troy Reader's probably going to end up playing a lot more than an emergency backup, right? So like that's sort of the troubling thing, I think, with trying to find him. Quality wise, I think he's in the D tier in terms of the amount of snaps that he's actually going to end up playing in the role he's going to have on defense. You know, that part is probably actually ranked a little bit higher. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I mean, the range of outcomes is pretty big for him.
Right.
All right. Speaking of a big range of outcomes, where are we putting Kenneth Murray?
Okay, me personally, because part of this is projection, I do think it's so tough. Like, okay, so he plays like this, will probably be this, but he has upside. So, like, where do you add
How do you
him?
draw a line?
Right. I think if I were to, like, he does have upside, but he also has an awful floor right now, potentially too.
Right.
He is going to start. First off, we're talking about role. Like, he is going to be the starter. I think this year he ends up clocking in at here, and I think does this categorize him as a breakout season? Not really, but it'd be a much improved season for him. And I just think with the stability on and off the field, I think he can settle in at C. I could put him at upside, but like Asante Samuel Jr. is still, okay, let's say a top 20, 25 corner. Is Kenneth Murray one of the worst linebackers in the league last year? Yeah, kind of. So I can't really put him up here with some guys that can actually hang and start and did last year. So to me, he kind of fits in that C range because I think he can get there this year, but based on his play, he shouldn't be in the C tier, but I think he can get to the C tier.
Yeah, I think this is the challenging thing with like doing these tier lists in general is you get some of the gray areas. It's like, well, I wouldn't really say Kenneth Murray is as good as Drew Tranquil, but he's kind of in the same tier because I don't want to put him in the D tier. I also need to see the upside before I put him in the upside tier, given that he's been injured and given that he didn't finish the end of last year too strong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with putting him in this tier for now.
Yeah, I think you guys hit the nail on the head there. So we'll go back up front a little bit, talk about Kyle Van Noy. I think you can talk about Kyle Van Noy in a similar range as, I don't know how much upside he has left. So I think you probably slot in Kyle Van Noy in that average starter category, even though he's not necessarily a real starter. But again, putting him as like an emergency backup just feels wrong. So I don't know. Yeah. That's where I'm at. I think Kyle Van Noy is going to be a very valuable piece for this team. So because of that, I would put him kind of there. I could see an argument because we have seen that, full-time edge rusher role from him in 2019 when he had, I think, 52 total pressures and 8 sacks, which I think would be qualify for average starter with upside. But I think this version of Kyle Van Noy is probably in that same Austin Johnson, Drew Tranquil kind of range.
Yeah, I think with him, like the upside for him is, okay, he can cover, he can use him on different places. That's the upside, but I think that's kind of canceled out by the age, the drop in production, him being, and then just a true number 3. Like he's going to be the number 3 guy here. So I do think that, like, yes, there is upside to Kyle Van Noy, but I think there are other things that detract from his overall value. I think average starter number 3 option is fine, and that's that. Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, I think you probably put Kyle Van Noy. I almost sort of want to put him in like the B category because if you're talking about him as the number 2 option, like I do think there's an argument that if Khalil Mack wasn't on this team, for example, like Kyle Van Noy would be the Chargers' number 2 edge rusher right now. I don't think he'd be like the number 2 guy on like a majority of teams, but there's probably like 10 teams where Kyle Van Noy would be the number 2 edge rusher. So kind of depends on the role you're giving him. Obviously, on some teams, he would be more of the standard linebacker. On the Chargers, he is more of a standard pass rusher. As far as upside, right, like, he is what he is at this point, but depends on his usage. And obviously depends on kind of where you play him on the field. Like the Chargers are deciding to play him at edge versus, how another team or the Patriots would have used him more specifically. So I could see putting him in the B category, but I'm fine with keeping him in the C for the time being.
Yeah, and I think obviously a lot of his upside kind of depends on if people in front of him are healthy or not, unfortunately for him.
Absolutely.
So,
Right.
I think putting him in that category is right based off of where he is at in his career and on this team. But I think like that doesn't necessarily quantify his real value, if that makes sense.
Right.
Okay, should we do Michael Davis next or Bryce Callahan?
I think Michael Davis is an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
It's so like, okay, at this point, is he probably an average starter? Yeah, like, I don't think he's an emergency starter. That feels kind of harsh. He did finish the season like an emergency starter and a guy that didn't play that well. But I feel like with the injury, and then I think there was COVID, and then some other injury or whatever, that kind of made things really difficult. I did a mailbag for this. In the first 5 weeks, he was fantastic. I have him as a C plus because okay, like he's an average starter. On the other side, like he legit could cover Stephon Diggs. Like there's upside there.
Yeah.
And he did cover 2 of the best tight ends in the league and only gave up 46 yards or whatever it was. I think there's enough upside there where that's where I would put him. Also, he has some of the physical tools on this team to have some upside as is. He might be the number 2 option this year, but right now I think he's just an average starter with a lot of upside.
Yeah, I mean,
well, he's probably
sort of
peaked, but I
right.
think his role can have some upside.
Yeah, I think his role can have some upside. I think Michael Davis is sort of what he is at this point right now. I don't think he's going to get significantly better or have some kind of like breakout season. Yeah, I could put him in either probably like C or B. Like I that's sort of where I would see him at this point. But I think the coaching staff has showed that they value him more as a C right now. I could be sold on the idea that he has upside, but also like they have made an awful lot of moves in the secondary for a team that used to consider Michael Davis CB1, right? So that's also just kind of the idea that like they don't really consider him their cornerback of the future or like a possible breakout season for him. I don't know if that's something they consider. So I'm fine with putting him in the C tier for now.
Yeah, he's kind of similar. How I feel about him is kind of similar to Kenneth Murray, but I think like his floor is much higher. So I'm kind of like I think if we get 2020 Michael Davis, then you could put him right next to Asante Samuel Jr. But I think you probably end up again. This is probably the one that we most need some training camp clarification on.
Absolutely.
What is his role. So I think for now, I would kind of lean towards putting him in the C category as well, like Alex.
Okay. Yep. I totally understand that.
And then if we figure out in training camp, or if the team figures out in training camp that he's the number 2 and Asante Samuel Jr. is kind of the first one off the bench, then we can kind of revisit this and swap those 2 players, I guess.
Makes sense.
All right, so now we got a bunch of backups. Some good quality depth options. I don't know if we'll cover all of these guys, but or if we do, maybe we'll talk about them.
Rapid fire.
Pretty quickly. So let's do JT Woods first, and then we'll get to Mr. Not showing up to OTAs, and I feel like that's a good spot for him. So, Alex, where are you putting JT Woods right now?
I think you probably have to put him in. Probably the upside category to start by default. Like, I mean, I think you could sort of argue him being, because I mean, this depends if for 2022 or 2023. Because I do think if you're talking about 2022, he still does have that upside. He is going to play a lot as the third safety in that rotation. 2023, I mean, that's sort of what you're aiming for after Nasir Adderley leaves too. So he feels. I could get why someone would say D tier because he's not really a good starter yet, right? He's more depth kind of backup in his first year, but I think the role he's going to play and his importance to this team going forward, I think you sort of have to put him in the upside tier by default.
Tyler, I think you grabbed Jaw Taylor instead of JT.
Oh yeah. Haha. Sorry. There we go.
There you go. I think because of his ball production, I think you kind of I'm with Alex here, or the potential of ball production. I think you do kind of have to put him here. I know he's not necessarily going to play a ton of snaps to be considered like a true starter, but like if JT Woods has like 4 interceptions this year, then I think we feel really good about his rookie season.
Right.
But also, do they lean more corner heavy with Callahan and Michael Davis if everybody's healthy? So I do have questions about like his snap percentage role, but if everything hits right, then I think this is kind of his ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of by like pure definition, he is an emergency starter backup. I don't know. So I kind of lean more towards the floor here. But Tyler, I'm curious your thoughts here.
Yeah, I just think because like I'm looking at the guys that are in the C+ category, and I've seen them play football. I'm not saying that I wouldn't. Like we put Zion Johnson with other guys who have played football, but I think JT Woods, where I had him as like a 3rd round grade, but probably should have been like a 4th based on film. But there is that upside, and that's kind of why I give him the 3rd round grade, because there's that athletic upside, there's the ball production, but his ball production stable year to year. It's not. So I'm not saying he won't have 7 interceptions. That'd be great, but I just don't know if we can count on that all the time until we see it in the NFL. So to me, honestly, because he, by definition, is not a starter, I have him in the D category. It'd be like a D+ category if we have one, really.
Sure.
But I think for me, he fits in the D category.
Yeah, I agree. Let's put in there. And then I think we can also put Tavon Campbell there. Don't really feel like we need to talk a whole lot about him. I think you could probably put Tito there as well. Very similar to JT Woods, right? Like D, but probably, D+ if we had one. Christian Covington in that same situation, maybe.
Yeah, I mean that's basically like he is the classic emergency starter backup for this team, so that makes sense. I'm fascinated of where you're about to all put Jerry Tillery, so I can't wait to get to that.
Okay, so I know I said we'd do Tillery next, and then I rattled off 4 other players, but let's get to Jerry Tillery right now. Alex, why don't you kick us off here?
Egg belay tier.
Okay. Everybody date my sister. If Jerry Tillery dated my sister, that'd be the best thing he's ever done.
You imagine though how like conflicted you would feel about this?
No, I would. I would. I'm glad they declined his 5th-year option. If that were the case.
All right, let me just look up. I just want to find pass rush stuff before I.
He's like 60th to 70th in pass rush stuff, and then like 120 somethingth in run stop.
Yeah, I know he's awful in run stuffing, but I just want to see. Oh God, I didn't realize he was down this far. Jesus.
Are you scrolling?
So I filtered it to. I mean, obviously for total pressures, it wouldn't do that much, but this is regular and postseason. Okay, let me do just regular. All right, PFF, come on. Really? Why are you taking so long?
Chat while you're watching and listening. Where do you have Jerry Tillery? Should I make a special category? What do you guys think?
I mean, okay. In reality, see, like, I don't know. You probably put him in like D tier in actuality, but he's not going to get cut, so you wouldn't put him in E tier. So I want to send a message by putting him in the egg belay tier.
You got him.
He wouldn't be enough.
Okay, so PFF finally loaded. So if you filter PFF to pass rushing stats for just defensive tackles who have 50% of their team's pass rushing snaps, Jerry Tillery, the actual pass rusher, supposedly, 31 total pressures, which is tied with Christian Wilkins, a run-stuffing nose tackle, Bilal Nichols, who just signed with the Raiders as well, and 47-year-old Calais Campbell.
Oh, jeez.
For where?
So he's behind Greg Gaines, a run-stuffing nose tackle. He's behind Osa Odigizua, who was a rookie last year. He's behind Ndamukong Suh, Sheldon Richardson. I mean, you get the picture. I feel like I'm piling on at this
Yeah.
point, but
Yeah, I mean, you said Bilal Nichols. I wouldn't be shocked if he had a worse run stop rate than Bilal Powell. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Oh man, this is rough. I didn't realize it was this rough in pass rush. I guess it's been a while since I looked at this. He has a worse pass rush win rate than Derek Brown. And I just talked about Austin Johnson not being a great pass rusher. Austin Johnson has a pass rush win rate of 8, and Jerry Tillery has one of 8.8. So he's barely a better pass rusher than Austin Johnson at this point in the career. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I think
just
the
broke
D
my
tier is
brain a little bit.
a good spot for him. He just has tumbled. Maybe last year we even put him in like the C plus average starter with upside. It's just it's D. People are talking about him being cut. I just don't think that happens. I don't think it's even worth it to the team to do that. I don't think he's so not roster bubble, not practice squad, unless he is throwing some sort of fit. But I don't think that's happening. I just think he's in the D category right now, unfortunately.
Guys, I didn't realize it was that bad.
Oh,
it's always felt that bad.
And I'm curious how many of his, I wish Arjun were in the chat, how many of his pressures were true earned pressures and not generated pressures on, say, a stunt, loop, twist, whatever.
I remember having conversations with Arjun like during the season where it was like, oh, Tillery had 4 pressures, but really only 2 of them were legit.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And again, we could probably go through for a lot of players and do that, but Tillery, it never, unless he's playing the Chiefs or the Bengals, it never really feels like they're consistent. So yeah. D, that's where I'd put him. Former first round pick at a D. That whole class really, and just really the last couple of drafts, we don't have anybody they drafted in the last couple of drafts in, B, A, all pro, which is fine, I guess. But, we're like banking on Adderley, we're banking on Samuel Jr. and everybody else, like Tillery down here, Tranquil. Actually, Tranquil being a C is good, but
yeah, that's fine. And I mean, if Kaiser White were still on this team, I feel like you feel fine there too. But man, it's bad. Who's that player on the far left there?
This is Amen.
Okay, so we'll run through these really quickly. I think you can put Amen as an emergency starter backup as well. Although the team reportedly likes him, I think you could put Ja Taylor, who they drafted there. Sorry, I know you put him at the end there. I think you could put Chris Rumpf in that same category. The In-N-Out Burger is Braden Fehoko, right?
Yep.
So he's an interesting one because his production says that he's a solid starter, at least as a run defender. But I feel like he's also on the roster bubble, unfortunately.
Yeah, he played like 50 snaps. I mean, they view him like the way they have it currently is as, geez, I'm going to put him in his own category.
No, there are the others there too.
Okay. Yeah, like they didn't have him be an well, I think he was maybe an emergency starter for a bit against the Steelers. Otherwise, he really wasn't. Like to this team, he's in the F tier. I could put him in that D category but like just where he stands with the roster, I do think he's in that tier. Even though, like you said, when he plays, he should be in like the C tier at least, but he just doesn't play that much.
Yeah, I would rather have Fehoko over Christian Covington, but I just feel like Braden's kind of looking on the outside looking in, unfortunately. So next to him, I think you could put Gaziano and Forrest Merrill.
Yeah.
As well as Dean Leonard.
Mm-hmm.
Is that last picture Nick Neiman, or is he the second one now?
Nick Neiman's on the right.
So I think you can put Neiman next to Rumpf, right?
Yeah. At this point, that is what he is. Honestly, I would, like, if I had to try to sort out this group over here, I might put Amen down here as like outside looking in. It depends how many linebackers they keep. If they keep 5, then he's making the roster, and he is an emergency starter and was. So, but it's fine. Who cares, really?
All right. So
Bryce Callahan. I'm going to go left to right. It's Bryce Callahan, Mark Webb, Alohi Gilman.
I think we put Alohi Gilman in E tier.
Come on, that's mean. That is reserved for specific people.
Oh no! Wait, no.
Put
Sorry,
Neiman next to Dean
I no,
Leonard.
sorry, I read that wrong. Someone swapped the E and the F like they were talking about earlier. I meant to put him in the roster bubble tier. That makes more sense. Not the EE tier, but the light blue one.
Yeah,
Okay.
put Alohi next to Dean Leonard because I think you have a
I
hard
think
time
so.
picturing them keeping more than 4 safeties this year, and they didn't draft Alohi, which essentially would mean that the 2020 class is literally Justin Herbert and a whole lot of nothing else. But Alohi being a 6th-round pick and kind of carrying the back end of that draft is not really fair for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there is some upside here to potentially challenge for a roster spot.
Sure.
But I think Mark Webb just can do more things, and I think he can do more things well. Again, we barely saw him, right? But just how I feel about my evaluation of the draft prospects. So I would put Webb as an emergency starter backup next.
I put him there too.
Yeah, that's fine by me.
And then final one here, Bryce Callahan. I think you kind of have to put him right next to Michael Davis.
Yeah, I'm fine with putting him in the C tier.
Because I think I think he has some upside, right? But I think the main thing here is, can he stay healthy for 10 games at least to kind of give you some value? Obviously, if he doesn't, then you're talking about, again, he has that injury waiver clause for a reason. But I think if he is kind of your starting slot, then he could be up higher on this list. If he's Michael Davis's backup, then you're talking about where he is right now. So I feel good about the player and the value and the depth, but I don't know how high he really can be on this list with the injuries and just kind of the lack of defined role right now.
Yeah, I totally get it. Cool. That's our interestingly skewed tier set here. I wish I could flip it so I can see it kind of a different way, but no
you
members of the draft.
Other angle, put us at the bottom. Can you do that another way?
I don't think so.
Is that different enough?
Oh no, sorry. I meant like flip the graph.
So okay. So do like vertically almost.
Yeah, but whatever. So no members of the 2021 or 2022 class outside of the D tier or above the D tier. Unless you count.
I think that's just more about the role though, because
totally
Woods is not a starter, but I feel good about his instant projection as a 6 DB.
Yeah, and they also didn't have a 2nd-round pick, so I mean that kind of corresponds to that as well.
All right. If anyone in the chat still left has any gripes with any of the players, speak your piece now in the chat. Alex, Tyler, anybody that you feel like we should move around before we end today's show?
I do agree with the chat that Joey Bosa belongs up here, but I also understand why we didn't put him up there as well. I'm surprised that Chris Rumph being down here wasn't again contested. I completely agree. Like, he was one of the worst edge rushers in terms of pass rusher in the league last year, so that makes sense. Otherwise, I basically agree. It was either one spot above or below when we were talking about it that I maybe disagreed, but otherwise, for the most part, I'm all there. Rainer Code says we missed a player.
Did we?
I can't think of who we. I mean, we did miss players. Like, there are players that I'm not including on here. Don't get me wrong. Like Keemon Hall. I just think he's like off the roster. Ben DeLuca, Andrew Brown.
Yeah.
Like, I totally get it. If that's who you're talking about, then yeah, we know. But if I miss a starter or a rotational guy, Egbelay's down here. Like Jamal Davis, Ty Shelby, I just don't see them making the roster. So I don't.
Yeah, I don't have too many qualms left with this list. I think you could probably make the case to move Nasir Adderley down just because I don't know how much upside he has, like I said, with the GT Woods thing. I don't know if I would call Kenneth Murray an average starter along with Drew Tranquil. That's a tough spot right now, but I understood why we put him there. So this obviously just comes down to like how you kind of define each term. And I think the fact that we have the upside tier makes things a little bit more skewed than they are for particularly older players. So I'm fine with what we did with this list today. I think it mostly checks out.
We didn't really DZ asking about Mark, but we didn't really talk about him. Again, he played like 6 snaps before he got hurt against the Chiefs. So I think just because of, his draft selection and what we kind of think of him, we put him in the emergency backup category, but it's a lot of projection there. Essentially had a redshirt season last year. I don't think he's healthy yet still. From the OTA pictures I've seen, he's never had his helmet on or anything like that. Always kind of walking around on the sideline. So would love to get an update on his injury there.
Yeah.
Because if it's that bad of an injury, maybe he's kind of more on the roster bubble than we think right now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I guess you could make a better argument for JT Woods being viewed as a starter option, because technically he is the third safety. But I don't know how much else I would change, because Troy Reader, if Murray is healthy, Reader's a backup. Tavon Campbell, obviously backup. Tito, backup. Christian Covington, backup. I mean, Tillery technically is a starter if you're talking about a 3-4 defense, but that's not how we feel about him.
Right.
So really, I think the only one that you could potentially move up is Woods.
Yeah, then it's just trying to figure out. I guess it's not fair because every position is different, but like, do I view Woods the same as I do Michael Davis or Kyle Van Noy?
Yeah.
Not really. But then do I view him in the same way as Kenneth Murray? Kind of. So I don't know. It's tough to project. But yeah, I mean, JT Woods is there for me. He will play more significant snaps than someone who's considered an emergency starter or backup. But it's hard for me to put him with some of the other guys that are ahead of him.
Yeah. Alex, any final thoughts, man?
No, don't have too many other final thoughts. I think we did good on the tier list today. I'm still going to protest. I do think that Tillery belongs in the E tier, but I understand that Tangalay is there by himself for a reason. But overall, I think we did good with the tier list today. I think there's a couple points you could argue. But yeah, no, happy that we got to make this tier list and just see where everyone is. And like Steven said, happy to see how the season plays out and see where everyone is by season's end.
I think we could have just made when we did the depth chart analysis, we could have just done another dead to me category and put Egbole and Jerry Tillery next to each other.
Aw. Thanks for working on it right now, Tyler.
Oh my goodness. This is amazing. Live TV for you guys in the chat here.
Inside baseball.
So I know we've been going for pretty long today. Again, we were not necessarily planning for an hour and a half show. Oh, you made 2 tiers.
Oh God, what did I do? Never mind. End the show. Go away. End the show now.
All right. So just to let everybody know kind of what's happening over the next couple of weeks, we are going to do a Saturday Q&A. We are not going to have our usual Sunday or Monday episode because it is Memorial Day. So we will be enjoying the holiday. And hope you guys do as well. Oh, somebody was saying that we missed Jamal Davis. I mean, I guess you put him right in the practice squad category, so that one's kind of easy.
Bam, mission accomplished.
There you go. And then after that, unfortunately, Tyler is going on vacation. Alex is going to be doing some finals for med school. So next week is going to be me and some guests. We'll figure it out. And then the next week after that, we should all be back together before we take a little summer break. So just wanted to let everybody know kind of where we're at the next couple of weeks. Again, if you missed it, there is a Isaiah Spiller giveaway happening on our Twitter /YouTube /Patreon pages. Make sure you go and enter that if you want a chance at a free Isaiah Spiller jersey. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Thanks for all the support. We'll see you guys later.